Reports came out this morning that I want you to pay attention to. Ghalibaf, the Iranian parliamentary speaker who sat across from Vance for 21 hours in Islamabad, the man Trump personally named as Washington's interlocutor, the closest thing to a dealmaker Iran had, has reportedly resigned as Iran's chief negotiator. The reason, according to multiple reports citing Channel 12 and Israeli sources, is growing interference from IRGC generals who blocked a Qatari proposal that Ghalibaf supported. An exchange of 20 Iranian ships for 20 Gulf ships through Hormuz. The IRGC killed the proposal. Ghalibaf stepped down in protest. Oil is at $10.0680 this morning, up 5% from Wednesday. And China has not said a single word about Ghalibaf's resignation. Everyone covering this is calling it an internal Iranian political dispute, a power struggle between factions that will resolve once pressure builds further. The diplomatic faction is down today. It may be up tomorrow. Iran's government is fractured, and fractured governments eventually produce negotiators who can make decisions. I want to argue it is not a political dispute. I want to argue it is a signal, and the specific signal is not that Iran is harder to deal with today than it was yesterday. The signal is that the faction inside Iran, which has concluded that resistance is preferable to any deal, just won the internal argument. China has seen a country reach that moment before. The last time a country's moderate diplomat was replaced by military hardliners at the exact point when a deal was within reach. What came next was not a negotiation. It changed the war. That is the framework I want to take you through today. I call it the diplomatic displacement signal. And understanding what China reads in this moment and why it reads it very differently from how Washington is reading it right now tells you what comes next. Start with what actually happened to Ghalibaf, because the details matter more than the outcome. The Qatari proposal that triggered his resignation was specific. 20 Iranian vessels get guaranteed passage through Hormuz in exchange for 20 vessels from Arab Gulf ports. A reciprocal arrangement, equal numbers, neither side formally conceding the sovereignty question. Ghalibaf supported it. The IRGC rejected it, not because of the numbers, because of the precedent. The IRGC's position, stated explicitly, is that passage through Hormuz is coordinated with Iranian authorities. A reciprocal arrangement with Gulf states implies bilateral equivalence, that Gulf vessels have the same access rights as Iranian vessels, which contradicts the IRGC's claim of unilateral Iranian sovereign authority over the strait. The IRGC did not reject the numbers, it rejected the framing, and when Ghalibaf tried to move forward on the framing, the IRGC rejected. The IRGC moved to replace the decision maker. That is not a negotiating tactic. That is a structural decision. Here is what it means for the deal America has been trying to reach. Euronews and Iran International confirmed this week that under wartime conditions, all critical positions in Iran must be chosen and managed directly by the Revolutionary Guards. Ghalibaf and Araghchi, Iran's two most visible negotiating faces, cannot make decisions without IRGC approval. Pezeshkian has been blocked from key decisions. The appointment of Mohammad Bagher Zolgadar as Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council was forced on Pezeshkian by IRGC commanders despite his objections. The civilian government of Iran exists. It negotiates. It sends delegations. It issues statements. But every decision those delegations make is subject to IRGC veto. And today, the IRGC exercised that veto on the one proposal that had enough mutual concession to move the process forward. Trump has been posting on Truth Social that Iran is in turmoil, that nobody knows who the leader is, that the infighting between hardliners and moderates is truly serious. Trump is right about the infighting. He is wrong about what it means. He is treating the IRGC's victory over Ghalibaf as evidence of Iranian weakness. It is evidence of Iranian clarity. The faction that has concluded no deal on American terms is acceptable, just won the internal argument. A country is not weakened when its most decisive faction consolidates power. It becomes more coherent. And a more coherent IRGC is not an Iran that is closer to a deal. It is an Iran that has just removed the person who came closest to one. Now what China has seen before, because this is where the signal becomes visible. China does not analyze international relations the way Western media does. China does not look at Galab's resignation and see a dysfunction story. China looks at it and recognizes a pattern. Specifically, it recognizes the pattern of diplomatic displacement, the moment when a country's moderate diplomatic faction is sidelined by its military command at the precise point when a deal was achievable. China has studied this pattern from multiple historical cases. The most instructive is not Japan 1941. The military takeover in that case happened years before Pearl Harbor. The more precise parallel is August 1914 Europe. In the final days before World War I began, German Foreign Secretary Zhao and Austrian Foreign Minister Behold, the officials who had been conducting the diplomatic back channels, were systematically bypassed by their respective military commands as the generals activated war plans that could not be reversed. The civilian diplomats had frameworks for de-escalation. The military commands had mobilization schedules. The military schedules won within 72 hours of the diplomatic displacement. The war began that nobody had planned to start. The parallel is not that this situation leads to a world war. The parallel is the mechanism diplomatic displacement by military command, at the moment when a deal is within reach, signals that the military command has calculated the cost of the deal is higher than the cost of continued conflict. The IRGC blocked the Qatar proposal not because the numbers were wrong, because it is calculated that accepting any arrangement that implies reciprocal access rights surrenders the position that makes Iran's control of Hormuz strategically permanent, and a strategically permanent Hormuz is worth more to the IRGC than any deal America is currently offering. China reads that calculation with precision because China built the system specifically to benefit from exactly this outcome. Before this war, China spent a decade constructing what I call the Decade of Quiet, a parallel economic architecture designed to ensure that if Iran ever reached this moment, it would have the oxygen to hold its position without collapsing. UN payments through second-tier Chinese banks outside SWIFT, a dark fleet of transponder-off tankers conducting ship-to-ship transfers in Malaysian waters where Iranian crude is relabeled and delivered to Chinese teapot refineries without documentation. A 1-2 billion barrel strategic reserve built from sanctioned Iranian and Russian crude. Precisely so that when Hormuz closed and oil hit 16 China would not be the country scrambling for supply. The result of that architecture is visible in a single number. Before this war, Iran was exporting 168 million barrels of oil per day. During the most intense weeks of conflict, Hormuz largely closed American bombing at its peak. Iran exported 184 million barrels per day. Barrels more during the war than before it. China's customs records show zero imports from Iran, but China's recorded imports of so-called Malaysian crude run to 3 million barrels per day, more than double Malaysia's entire national oil production. That oil is Iranian. The system that moves it cannot be reached by the blockade. And as long as that system runs, Iran's internal faction that says resistance is survivable has a data point that proves it. Every barrel that reaches China is a rung on the IRGC's confidence ladder. Galabaf's resignation is the IRGC cashing in those rungs. China is on the permitted list. Russia is on the permitted list. The IRGC controls who is on the permitted list. And the IRGC just demonstrated by rejecting a proposal that would have extended the permitted list to Gulf vessels that it intends to keep the list selective. A selective Hormuz managed by an IRGC that has just sidelined its own diplomatic moderates is a Hormuz where China's preferred position is permanent rather than provisional. China's silence about Galabaf's resignation is not indifference. It is calculated endorsement. Here is what Galabaf's departure means for the deal's specific structure. America has been negotiating around 3 demands: no nuclear enrichment, Hormuz open on terms, America considers free navigation, and Iran's uranium to be physically removed from the country. At Islamabad, Iran came 80% of the way. The diplomatic faction Ghalibah and Arachi moved Iran toward compromise on the enrichment timeline and indicated flexibility on the uranium's destination. America proposed a 20-year pause on enrichment. Iran countered with 5 years. The gap is 15 years. America proposed Iran hand over its uranium stockpile. Iran said it will never be transferred anywhere. And the Hormuz question remained the hardest. Iran insisting passage is coordinated through Iranian authorities. America insisting on free navigation without Iranian sovereign authority. The IRGC's rejection of the Qatar proposal tells you what that 20% gap actually is. It is not a number, it is not a formula for supervision, it is the question of whether any passage through Hormuz requires Iranian permission or operates under an international framework that does not require Iranian permission. Ghalibah was willing to explore arrangements that blurred that line. The IRGC is not willing to blur it. And without Ghalibah, the person conducting the next round of negotiations is the person the IRGC approves. The person the IRGC approves will not blur the Hormuz sovereignty question, which means the 20% gap that exists today will not be smaller in the next round. It will be the same size or larger. There is a further dimension to the IRGC's calculation that the coverage is missing entirely. Iran is now collecting tolls at Hormuz. Ghalibah's own deputy confirmed this morning that Iran received its first revenue from the tolls it is imposing on ships seeking to cross the strait. Ships are paying. Iran is getting money. The IRGC, which controls the toll collection, has just converted Hormuz from a geopolitical leverage point into a revenue stream. That conversion changes the IRGC's incentive structure fundamentally. When Hormuz was leverage, the incentive was to use it to extract concessions from America. When Hormuz is revenue, the incentive is to maintain the system that generates the revenue. A deal that opens Hormuz on free navigation terms ends the toll revenue. A deal that establishes Iranian sovereign coordination authority keeps the toll revenue flowing. The IRGC has just demonstrated which deal it prefers by rejecting the one that would have moved toward the first outcome. Meanwhile, Trump ordered the U.S. Navy this morning to destroy any Iranian vessel caught laying mines in Hormuz, not seize, destroy. That is an escalation in the rules of engagement that the ceasefire is supposed to be pausing. The IRGC's response to the destroy order has been silence, not a counter-threat, not a formal protest. Silence, which is either the IRGC calculating it can absorb the order or the IRGC calculating that the order changes nothing about its operational position because the mines that matter are already in the water. Either way, the IRGC is running both sides of today's news, the diplomatic displacement inside Iran, and the operational silence on Trump's destroy order without a word from the faction that supposedly ran Iran's diplomacy as of this morning. Let me steel man the American and optimistic positions because there are serious arguments on the other side that I want you to test. The optimistic argument is threefold. First, Ghalibah's resignation is not confirmed. The report comes from Channel 12 in Israel, which cited an unsourced television report. Israeli media has an obvious interest in portraying Iranian negotiations as collapsing. Iran's government has not confirmed the resignation. Ghalibah himself has not publicly confirmed it. The IRGC has not confirmed it until Iran officially names a replacement, or Ghalibah himself speaks. This remains an unconfirmed report. The diplomatic faction may still be functional. Second, even if the resignation is real, Arachi remains as foreign minister. Arshi was in Islamabad. Arshi has been the diplomatic channel throughout this conflict. Arachi said at multiple points that Iran is within reach of a deal. Losing Ghalibah removes one voice but does not eliminate the diplomatic faction. And Trump has indicated he is open to a deal quickly. Negotiations could resume as soon as tomorrow, which means the American side remains engaged, even as the Iranian side reorganizes. Third, the IRGC's rejection of the Qatar proposal may actually narrow rather than widen the gap. The Qatar proposal was one of several frameworks being discussed. The IRGC rejecting one specific framing while Ghalibah steps down does not foreclose other framings. A different arrangement that does not imply bilateral equivalence on Hormuz's access rights might achieve the same practical result while letting the IRGC claim sovereign authority. The gap in this reading is not the IRGC's position that Iran controls Hormuz. It is finding the language that lets America say Hormuz is open while letting Iran say Hormuz is coordinated through Iranian authorities. Both things are technically true and incompatible only as formal legal claims, not as operational reality. That argument has real weight. The unconfirmed source is a genuine limitation. Aragi's continued presence matters, and formulas that let both sides claim victory have produced deals before. But here is what the steelmen cannot account for. The IRGC did not just block a proposal, it removed the person who proposed it. That is categorically different from blocking a policy. Blocking a policy leaves the relationship intact. Removing the policymaker signals that the IRGC does not trust the person making the proposals and will not trust the next proposal he makes either. Even if Golab returns, even if the resignation is walked back, the IRGC has established publicly that it has veto power over the negotiating team's chief. Every Iranian diplomat who observes that knows the lesson. Make proposals the IRGC likes or leave. That lesson does not disappear even if Galibaf's desk stays warm. And China, which has watched Iran's internal power structure consolidate around the IRGC for 56 days, knows what happens when military commands learn they can remove diplomats by threatening to watch 3 things in the next 48 hours. The first is whether Iran officially confirms or denies Galibaf's resignation. Not a Channel 12 report, an official Iranian government statement either confirming he has stepped back from the negotiating role or naming who will lead the next round. The absence of a denial is almost as significant as a confirmation. A government that wanted to counter the narrative that its chief negotiator quit would deny it immediately. Every hour without an official Iranian denial is an hour in which the IRGC's version of events that Galibaf was sidelined because of his positions goes unchallenged inside Iran's political system. Watch the Iranian government's official news channels specifically. Watch whether Galibaf himself appears publicly. His silence is not the same as Iran's silence, but it tells you whether he retains any standing to push back on what the IRGC did. The second is whether any new Iranian negotiator is named publicly and what their background is. The specific name matters enormously. If the replacement comes from the civilian foreign ministry, from Arachi's team, from the technical diplomatic staff that negotiated at Islamabad, the diplomatic faction is still operating under IRGC supervision, but still present. If the replacement comes from a background with direct IRGC command experience, the military command has not just blocked a proposal, it has installed its own representative at the table. That distinction, civilian diplomat versus IRGC connected figure, tells you which Iran is conducting the next negotiation, and which Iran is conducting the next negotiation tells you whether the remaining 20% gap narrows, holds steady, or grows. The third is whether China makes any statement specifically about the negotiations now that the diplomatic landscape inside Iran has shifted. Wang Yi has called Araghchi repeatedly, 26 confirmed calls during this conflict. If Wang Yi calls Araghchi today, and the readout includes any language about the importance of sustained diplomatic representation or continuity of the negotiating process, China is signaling that it is concerned about IRGC displacement of the civilian team and wants the diplomatic channel preserved. If China's next statement is a generic call for ceasefire and peaceful resolution, with no reference to the Galibaf situation, China has decided that what the IRGC just did serves China's current positioning better than a Chinese objection would. Watch also for what happens to the toll revenue number. Galibaf's deputy confirmed Iran received its first toll revenue today. Watch whether that number is published officially by Iran in the coming days. If Iran publicly announces cumulative toll revenue from Hormuz, it is establishing the toll system as a legitimate ongoing revenue stream, not a temporary wartime measure, but a permanent institutional mechanism. The publication of toll revenue is the IRGC saying to the world, this is how Hormuz works now. We manage it. We collect from it. Any deal that changes that arrangement ends a revenue stream we have already institutionalized. That is a very different negotiating position from the position Galibba was trying to reach. Here are the two paths from this moment because the diplomatic displacement signal has historically produced one of two outcomes, and it is worth being specific. The first path is that Galibba's departure is temporary and Arachi fills the gap. America makes a gesture, modifies blockade language, releases a detained crew member, signals flexibility on the uranium timeline that gives Iran's diplomatic factions something to point to domestically. The IRGC decides that the gesture is sufficient to justify returning to talks without looking like it is conceding the position it just asserted. Galibov is not replaced by an IRGC figure. Arachi leads the next round. The diplomatic displacement is a warning shot rather than a terminal event. This path is possible. It requires America to understand that the IRGC's rejection of the Qatar proposal was about the framing, not the numbers, and to find a framework that preserves the IRGC's sovereign authority claim while producing the practical outcome America needs on passage. That framework exists. It is technically achievable. Whether American negotiators can construct it without publicly conceding the sovereignty question is the operational challenge. The second path is that the IRGC's sidelining of Galibba becomes permanent, and the next Iranian representative at any talks is someone the IRGC has installed, rather than someone the civilian government chose. In that case, the 20% gap on Hormuz's sovereignty does not close. It becomes the floor of Iran's position rather than the ceiling. The IRGC's toll collection, its selective access list, its coordinated passage authority become the starting point for any negotiation rather than the endpoint Iran is trying to reach. America's demand for free navigation becomes structurally incompatible with the IRGC's institutionalized management of the strait, and a conflict with incompatible, non-negotiable positions on its central issue is not a conflict that produces a deal. It is a conflict that produces an extended stalemate with periodically higher and lower violence until one side's calculation about survivability changes. China is positioned for both paths. For the first path, China's facilitation role produces influence over the deal's terms. For the second path, China's dark fleet, strategic reserve, and selective access position produce commercial advantage through the extended stalemate. Either way, China wins. And China's silence about Galib's resignation this morning tells you China has already calculated which path it expects. Push back on this if you see it differently. Read the Times of Israel report on Galib's departure, specifically the detail about the Qatar proposal and the IRGC rejection. Read the Euronews report on the IRGC's consolidation of power, specifically the language that all critical positions must be chosen and managed directly by the Revolutionary Guards under wartime conditions. Read the Washington Post analysis on how America's decapitation strategy killed the people who held Iran's decision-making together. Read the toll revenue confirmation from Galib's own deputy. Read what Trump posted about nobody knowing who leads Iran and ask whether that confusion is a sign of Iranian weakness or American misreading. And then ask the question the press briefings are not asking today. If the man America was negotiating with just resigned because the IRGC blocked his proposal and China has not said a single word about it, what is China reading in that silence? China already has an answer to that question. And the answer is what comes after a country loses its diplomat at exactly the moment when a deal was within reach.